Emma Sullivan hurried down the quiet streets of Maplewood, her mind swirling with the usual morning thoughts, work deadlines, grocery lists, and the never-ending hum of life that seemed to pull her in 1,000 directions. The crisp autumn air brushed against her cheeks as she pushed open the door of her favorite corner cafe, seeking the familiar comfort of the rich aroma of coffee and the gentle hum of chatter that always made her feel at home. She had a ritual, a small moment of calm before the chaos of the day began, but that morning, something felt different, though she couldn't put her finger on it. As she scanned the cafe, her eyes caught a stranger sitting by the window, framed by the golden light streaming in. He had dark hair that fell lightly over his forehead, eyes that seemed deep and thoughtful, and a calm, understated confidence that immediately drew her attention, leaving her momentarily frozen in place. He looked up, catching her gaze, and smiled, a simple, warm smile that made her heart skip an unexpected beat. The moment hung between them like a fragile thread, delicate but full of unspoken meaning. "Hi, is this seat taken?" he asked, his voice soft but steady, carrying an unspoken curiosity that matched her own. Emma hesitated, unsure why she felt the need to give him space, though a small part of her wanted to sit beside him immediately. Finally, she shook her head, allowing him to join her at the small table by the window, and as he settled in, a strange sense of familiarity washed over her, as if she had known him somewhere, sometime, in another life. His name was Daniel, and conversation flowed with an ease that surprised her. They spoke about books, favorite authors, the small quirks of city life, and dreams of traveling to distant places, laughing lightly when they discovered shared tastes and quietly pausing when a deeper, more reflective thought arose. Emma noticed how he listened, really listened, making her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. Every word he spoke carried a weight of honesty, a warmth that resonated in her chest, and though she tried to maintain her usual composure, she found herself leaning in, hanging on to the sound of his voice. Outside, the morning sun continued its slow climb, casting soft shadows across the cafe, but inside, time seemed suspended, as if the rest of the world had melted away, leaving only the two of them in a bubble of quiet connection. Just as Emma began to feel a sense of comfort, a strange flutter of nervous energy swept over her. She realized how quickly her heart was racing, how tightly her palms were pressed against her coffee cup, and how aware she was of the subtle tension in the air, a tension that wasn't uncomfortable, but charged with possibility. Daniel, sensing her quiet unease, smiled again, a reassuring curve of his lips that made her relax just a little. Yet, just as the morning was settling into a rhythm of laughter and conversation, Daniel's phone buzzed sharply against the table, breaking the fragile spell. He glanced at the screen, a shadow passing briefly over his face, before he looked back at Emma with that same calm, warm expression, though she could sense the distraction lurking beneath. "I have to go, but maybe I'll see you again," he asked, his words carrying a gentle hope that mirrored her own growing desire to know him better. Emma nodded, forcing a polite smile, but inside, a strange ache blossomed, a mix of longing and curiosity that she couldn't quite shake. She watched him gather his things, the simple movement of standing and picking up his bag making her heart ache in ways she couldn't name. As he turned to leave, their eyes met one last time, and she felt an inexplicable pull, a magnetic tug that made it clear that this encounter was far from ordinary. She sat back in her chair, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup, staring at the empty space where he had been moments before, replaying every word, every glance, every subtle gesture, trying to understand why a stranger had left such a mark on her heart in such a short time. The cafe seemed quieter now, almost muted, and the usual comfort she found here felt different, as if it had been replaced by the lingering presence of someone new, someone who had shifted the rhythm of her morning without even trying. Emma felt a strange mix of emotions, curiosity, excitement, and a hint of fear, wondering who he was, what his story might be, and why he made her feel so unexpectedly alive. The city outside continued to move, the sounds of cars and distant chatter filtering through the windows, but inside, Emma's mind was elsewhere, caught in the memory of Daniel's voice, his smile, the gentle way he had tilted his head when he listened, the way his eyes seemed to see past her polite exterior into the quiet longing she often kept hidden. She realized with a jolt that she was not merely curious about him, she was intrigued, deeply drawn to someone who, by all rights, should have been just another stranger in a cafe on a Monday morning. The sensation was both thrilling and terrifying, a mix of emotions she hadn't felt in years, and it left her with a restless energy that carried her through the rest of her morning, her thoughts repeatedly drifting back to that single, fleeting encounter. Every little detail stayed with her, the way sunlight had glinted off his hair, the subtle tilt of his smile, the quiet way he had asked questions, his voice calm yet engaging, drawing her into a rhythm of dialogue that felt familiar even though it was the first time they had ever spoken. By the time Emma finally left the cafe, she felt as if she had stepped out of a warm, glowing bubble into the harsh brightness of the city, her heart both heavy and light at once. She walked slowly, retracing her steps along the familiar streets, her mind turning over the morning in endless permutations, trying to understand the inexplicable feeling that Daniel had stirred inside her. It wasn't simply attraction, she realized, it was something deeper, something almost spiritual, like meeting a soul who belonged in a part of your life you hadn't yet discovered. Emma wondered if fate had a hand in this unexpected crossing of paths, if perhaps the universe had conspired to place Daniel in her life, even if only for a brief moment, just to awaken something long dormant in her heart. The thought made her both anxious and hopeful, the kind of hope that makes mornings feel brighter and the world seem more vibrant, even when the future is uncertain. And as she reached her apartment, still replaying the encounter in her mind, she caught herself glancing at the streets below, wondering if she would see him again, if their paths would cross once more, and if the connection she felt so strongly was merely a fleeting coincidence or the beginning of something that could change the trajectory of her life entirely. That night, as she lay in bed, Emma couldn't stop thinking about Daniel, the warmth of his smile, the sincerity of his voice, and the strange, undeniable pull she felt toward him. Sleep came slowly, tangled with dreams of golden sunlight, laughter, and a pair of eyes that seemed to understand her better than anyone else ever had. Somewhere in the city, Daniel too was thinking of her, unaware of the quiet storm he had stirred in her heart, the beginnings of a connection that would soon test the boundaries of fate, longing, and love itself. And so, in the gentle glow of that first encounter, a story quietly began, full of potential, full of emotion, and full of the tender, unpredictable magic that life sometimes offers when you least expect it. Days passed since that first encounter, but Emma could hardly focus on her routine, her mind constantly wandered to Daniel, to the warmth of his presence, the way his voice had lingered in her thoughts long after he had left the cafe. She found herself looking for him everywhere, half expecting to catch a glimpse of those dark, thoughtful eyes on the street, in the bookstore, or at her favorite bakery, and then, almost magically, life seemed to answer her unspoken wishes as fate continued to bring them together in the most unexpected ways. It began with chance meetings, brief but meaningful, a brush of hands reaching for the same book at the library, a shared umbrella in a sudden drizzle, a smile across the crowded streets as if the universe itself was conspiring to keep them connected. Each encounter left her heart racing, her breath catching at the sight of him, and yet also left a strange ache, a longing she could neither name nor ignore. Daniel seemed equally affected, there was a subtle tension in the way he approached her, a mix of hesitation and yearning, like he was constantly measuring the distance between them yet unable to resist closing it. One evening, as amber light bathed the streets in the quiet glow of dusk, Emma found herself walking with him along a familiar path lined with trees that had already begun shedding their golden leaves. The city was calm, almost hushed, as if it knew this moment required space to breathe, and for a while, they walked in silence, letting the crunch of leaves underfoot carry the unspoken weight of their growing connection. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice soft but charged with emotion. "I feel like I've known you longer than I should." His words sent a shiver down Emma's spine, striking a chord deep within her, a truth she had felt but had been too hesitant to acknowledge. "I feel it too," she admitted, glancing at him with a mixture of vulnerability and courage, "and it scares me a little." He smiled, a tender, almost apologetic smile, and for a moment, the world seemed to narrow, focusing entirely on the space between them, the electric tension that hummed in the air. Their conversations became more personal, more intimate in ways that didn't require physical touch, yet each shared secret, each confiding glance, and each gentle laugh felt like threads weaving their hearts closer together. Emma noticed how Daniel listened, not just hearing her words, but understanding the emotions beneath them, the subtle fears and hopes she often kept hidden even from herself. She began to realize that what she felt was not a fleeting attraction but something deeper, something that rooted itself in quiet admiration, understanding, and the simple comfort of being seen by another human being in the most authentic way. And yet, amidst this growing connection, there remained a tension, a barrier she sensed but couldn't fully define, an invisible wall that Daniel seemed reluctant to cross, though it pained him as much as it did her. Their bond strengthened in these quiet, stolen moments, over coffee, walks in the park, and late-night conversations that stretched into the small hours, each encounter layering feelings of warmth, longing, and the slow realization that their hearts were gradually entwining, even as circumstances and unspoken realities loomed somewhere in the background. One evening, after a particularly long walk under the dim glow of streetlights, Daniel reached for her hand, a simple gesture, yet it carried the weight of everything he had been holding back. Emma's breath caught, her heart pounding as their fingers brushed and then intertwined, the touch sending a ripple of emotions through her body, a mixture of joy, fear, and longing all at once. It was a moment of unspoken truth, a silent acknowledgement that neither of them could deny the pull between them, yet even as she felt her heart swell, a small, sharp pang of uncertainty crept in, the sense that this connection, no matter how intense, was still fragile, delicate, and somehow incomplete. Daniel looked at her, searching her eyes for understanding, for permission, for reassurance, and in that gaze, Emma saw a reflection of her own emotions, hope and fear intertwined, a desire to trust yet a hesitation born of past experiences and the complexities life often imposes. But before the moment could evolve into something more profound, Daniel's phone rang, shattering the fragile bubble around them. He glanced at it, the brief shadow across his face betraying worry and urgency, and then he looked back at her with a bittersweet smile. I have to go. It's complicated, he said, his voice strained, heavy with unspoken explanations. Emma forced a smile, nodding, hiding the ache in her chest behind polite composure, though inside, her heart felt as if it were breaking and soaring all at once. She watched him leave, the distance between them suddenly feeling insurmountable, and yet in her chest, a quiet flame of hope remained, flickering stubbornly against the chill of disappointment. That night, as Emma lay in bed, the events of the day replayed relentlessly in her mind, the brush of hands, the warmth of his gaze, the magnetic pull that had drawn them together. Sleep came slowly, tangled with dreams of conversations that had never ended, laughter shared under golden lights, and quiet moments of connection that spoke louder than words ever could. She realized she had begun to care deeply, in ways she hadn't anticipated, and the idea of losing this burgeoning connection filled her with both fear and an aching longing she couldn't easily name. Emma wondered about Daniel constantly, what he thought, how he felt, whether he felt the same pull, the same undeniable force that drew their lives closer in spite of everything. Every encounter, every conversation, had built a bridge between them, fragile yet strong, and though the future remained uncertain, Emma felt a quiet determination to explore whatever it was that fate had placed in their path. Daniel too, walking alone through his own thoughts, wrestled with emotions he had tried to contain, confusion, desire, and an aching recognition that meeting Emma had changed the course of his life in ways he had not foreseen. He thought of her laugh, the light in her eyes when she was genuinely happy, the way she spoke of dreams and fears with honesty that left him both inspired and vulnerable. For both of them, each day became a careful dance of proximity and distance, of shared moments and withheld confessions, of longing tempered by caution, and yet every encounter reaffirmed the magnetic force pulling them toward each other, undeniable and persistent. Weeks went by, each encounter deepening their connection while simultaneously testing their patience and resolve. They found themselves sharing small, intimate details, like favorite songs, childhood memories, and hopes for the future, slowly weaving a tapestry of trust and affection that neither had anticipated when they first met in that sunlit cafe. Emma began to notice the subtle ways Daniel's presence altered her day, the small smile that lingered in her mind, the quiet anticipation of seeing him, the gentle warmth that seemed to permeate her thoughts, making ordinary routines feel charged with possibility. Likewise, Daniel felt a growing awareness of how much Emma had become a part of his inner world, how her laughter and insights lingered with him long after their time together ended, how the thought of her absence created an emptiness he had not anticipated. And through all of this, the tension remained, an unspoken question of what the future held, what obstacles might appear, and whether the connection they had forged was strong enough to withstand the unknown. Yet despite the uncertainty, there was a quiet determination in both their hearts, an acknowledgement that some forces, some connections, were too powerful to ignore, no matter how fleeting, complicated, or unpredictable they might seem. One evening, as the city lights flickered on, painting the streets in gold and amber, they sat on a bench in the park, hands lightly brushing again, hearts beating in sync without words, sharing a silence so comfortable it spoke volumes. Daniel looked at Emma, eyes searching hers, and whispered, almost to himself, "I don't know what comes next, but I can't imagine it without you." Emma felt tears prick at her eyes, a combination of joy, longing, and the bittersweet ache of knowing that love, in its truest form, often arrived. Complicated and imperfect, yet no less real or powerful. In that moment, beneath the quiet canopy of autumn trees, with the city humming softly around them, Emma and Daniel felt the undeniable truth of their connection, a fragile, beautiful bond forged through chance, fate, and the quiet courage to follow their hearts despite the unknown. And as they parted that night, lingering glances and unspoken promises filled the spaces between them, leaving both hearts aching and alive, ready for the next step in a story that neither could yet fully comprehend but both knew was only beginning, a story that promised love, longing, and the delicate thrill of a connection that could shape the course of their lives forever. The rainy afternoon caught Emma by surprise as she hurried down Maplewood's familiar streets, her umbrella barely shielding her from the persistent drizzle, and she found herself taking shelter in a small cafe she hadn't noticed before, seeking warmth and a brief escape from the wet chill, only to freeze mid-step when she saw Daniel sitting there, talking quietly with someone else, his expression both focused and tense. As she approached, her heart sank when she realized he wasn't alone in a casual sense. He was introducing himself with formal warmth to a woman she recognized as someone clearly important in his life, someone who had the gentle ring of familiarity and commitment that immediately made Emma's chest tighten with confusion and pain, a sharp contrast to the warmth she felt whenever she was around him, and for a moment, everything she had felt in recent weeks, the laughter, the quiet confessions, the shared glances, felt like it might have been a dream, something transient and fragile that could shatter at any second, and she struggled to process the storm of emotions that swirled within her, longing, jealousy, heartbreak, and the undeniable ache of attachment that had grown despite the uncertainty of their situation. She waited a moment, uncertain if she should confront him, retreat, or simply disappear and pretend she hadn't seen anything, but before she could decide, Daniel looked up, his eyes locking with hers, a flash of recognition, guilt, and something else, something that made her stomach twist in ways she hadn't felt before, and as he rose to meet her, the cafe seemed to shrink around them, the sounds of raindrops against the window and quiet chatter fading into the background, leaving only the tense weight of their unspoken truths. "Emma." He began, his voice faltering slightly as if words could never capture the complexity of the situation, and she felt tears sting her eyes, partly from the fear of losing him, partly from the sudden realization that love was rarely simple, and partly from the anger at fate for presenting her with something so beautiful yet so complicated. "What's going on, Daniel?" "Who is she?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, though her hands trembled slightly, the tension between wanting answers and fearing the truth nearly unbearable. He ran a hand through his damp hair, his expression conflicted, vulnerable, and undeniably human, as he finally spoke in a low, honest tone, "I never wanted to hurt you, Emma. Yes, I was supposed to marry someone else, yes, there are obligations, expectations, but meeting you changed everything. My heart doesn't belong to anyone else, it's been yours since the first day we met, and I didn't know how to say it, how to break free from the path I was expected to follow, but I can't ignore it any longer." Emma's mind spun, the initial shock gave way to a whirlwind of emotion as she struggled to reconcile the man she had come to know and love with the reality of his other commitments, and yet, as she looked into his eyes, she saw the truth, the sincerity, the undeniable pull of his feelings, and despite the fear and confusion, a fragile thread of hope began to form, a thread that whispered that maybe, just maybe, love could find a way through even the most tangled circumstances. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "So, it's me? You're saying it's always been me, and Daniel nodded, a mixture of relief and apprehension crossing his features, aware that confession was only the first step in a long and difficult journey. They sat there for hours, rain tapping softly against the windows, sharing their fears, dreams, and regrets, talking through what it meant for their lives, the obligations they had, and the risks of following their hearts despite the complexities that surrounded them, their emotions raw and unfiltered, each word a delicate thread weaving them closer together even as reality threatened to pull them apart. Emma felt herself laughing and crying in turns, her heart expanding with the intensity of feelings she had tried to contain, while Daniel's hands remained close, almost hovering, ready to offer comfort, reassurance, and presence without overwhelming her, each subtle gesture building a language of trust and intimacy that didn't require promises yet held all the weight of them. They walked together once the rain eased, sharing an umbrella and conversation, each step a dance of vulnerability, desire, and the hesitant joy of recognizing a connection that had the power to reshape their lives. Emma thought about all the stolen moments, the morning coffees, the walks in the park, the shared glances, and how they had led to this confrontation, the culmination of weeks of unspoken longing finally laid bare, and she realized that love, in its truest form, was never neat, never convenient, but always worth the struggle, the heartbreak, and the risk of the unknown. Daniel, for his part, reflected on how meeting Emma had pulled him from the life he thought he was destined to lead, challenging obligations and expectations, forcing him to confront the courage he hadn't realized he possessed, and though fear lingered, the certainty of his feelings left him no choice but to act, to be honest, to embrace the vulnerability that true connection demanded. By the time they returned to the quiet streets, wet leaves beneath their feet, the sun breaking through the clouds, Emma felt a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and exhilaration, her heart pounding with the realization that their story was far from over, that the path ahead would be filled with challenges, yet each obstacle seemed lighter when shared, and every step felt more purposeful because it was taken together. They parted that evening with a quiet promise in their eyes, a mutual understanding that love was messy, beautiful, and complicated, and that their connection had already grown stronger than either had anticipated, capable of surviving uncertainty, doubt, and the external pressures that life inevitably placed on them. Emma went home that night, thoughts swirling, heart full of emotion, replaying every moment of the day, every whispered confession, every tender glance, every brush of their hands, realizing that the love she felt for Daniel was no longer just hope, it was a living, breathing force, shaping her thoughts, her actions, and her dreams, compelling her to believe that even the most difficult circumstances could be overcome if hearts were willing to fight for one another. Daniel, walking back through the rain-soaked streets to his own apartment, felt the same overwhelming mix of relief and fear, knowing the road ahead was uncertain but also knowing that the choice had been made, that truth had been spoken, and that for the first time in years, he felt fully alive, fully seen, and fully connected to someone who mattered in ways that went far beyond superficial attraction. The next days became a delicate balance of anticipation and hesitation, where each interaction was precious, each moment charged with intensity, and every small gesture, from a smile to a shared coffee to the quiet acknowledgement of each other's presence, felt like a profound act of intimacy, building a foundation that neither could yet fully comprehend but both felt with complete certainty. Their hearts, though tested by unexpected truths and external complications, began to weave together, creating a tapestry of trust, desire, and mutual respect, a love story unfolding in real time, filled with all the tenderness, heartbreak, and longing that made life worth living. And in that quiet, emotionally charged space, beneath the lingering drizzle of the city's rain and the soft glow of streetlights reflecting on wet pavement, Emma and Daniel discovered a fundamental truth, that love, in its purest form, is never simple, but when it arrives with honesty, vulnerability, and courage, it carries the power to transform lives, heal wounds, and create a connection that defies logic, expectation, and circumstance, leaving both hearts full, alive, and ready to face whatever challenges fate would place in their path. Together, side by side, hearts intertwined in the delicate, unpredictable dance of love. Weeks had passed since Daniel's heartfelt confession, and Emma's heart still fluttered at the memory of that rainy afternoon, of the vulnerability they had shared, and the unspoken promise of a future they had not yet dared to define. Yet despite their growing closeness, both of them faced the reality of life's expectations and responsibilities that seemed Determined to test their fragile bond, Daniel, after nights of restless thought, had finally taken the courageous step to speak honestly with his family, confronting years of obligations and anticipated paths with the truth that his heart belonged entirely to Emma, a decision that weighed on him heavily but also filled him with a profound sense of relief and clarity, knowing that while the path forward was uncertain, it was a path chosen with complete awareness and love, and not one dictated by circumstance alone. Emma, meanwhile, spent her days immersed in her own world of work and friends, yet her thoughts repeatedly returned to Daniel, the sound of his voice, the warmth of his presence, the gentle way he made her feel seen and valued, and each fleeting thought reminded her of the strength of their connection, a bond that had survived uncertainty, confusion, and the complexities of life, proving to her that sometimes love demanded patience, courage, and unwavering belief in the heart's guidance. One crisp morning, as golden sunlight spilled across the streets of Maplewood, Daniel found himself walking toward the cafe where their story had begun, carrying the nervous anticipation of someone stepping into a new chapter of life, each step echoing with the weight of decisions made and the hope that Emma would welcome him with the same trust and affection that had defined their relationship from the start. When he arrived, he saw her sitting by the window, her eyes scanning the street. Almost instinctively, and the moment their gazes met, the world seemed to stop, leaving only the two of them in a shared space of recognition, longing, and the unspoken understanding that all that had passed, the challenges, the uncertainty, the near heartbreak, had led them here, to this intersection of fate and choice. Daniel approached cautiously, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and trepidation, and when he finally reached her table, he took her hand gently in his, the touch sending a familiar warmth coursing through both of them, grounding them in the reality of their love, a love that had endured testing and hesitation but had emerged resilient and undeniable. "Emma," he said softly, eyes locked on hers, "I chose us. I know it won't be easy, but I don't want another path. Only this one, with you." Emma's breath caught, tears threatening to spill as a wave of relief, joy, and deep affection washed over her. Every fear she had carried, every doubt about whether their love could survive, seemed to dissolve in the warmth of that simple declaration, and she realized in that moment that the heart's courage often came quietly but could ignite the most powerful transformations when given the chance. They sat together, hands entwined, speaking in soft tones about their dreams, fears, and the tentative plans they could now envision for a shared future, each word and glance reinforcing the trust and intimacy that had grown steadily through every encounter, conversation, and small act of care over the past weeks. It was a love built on honesty, patience, and the quiet knowledge that two hearts willing to fight for one another could overcome obstacles, uncertainty, and societal expectations, creating a bond that was both tender and enduring. As the day progressed, they walked through the park, leaves crunching beneath their feet, sharing light laughter, meaningful silences, and gentle touches that spoke louder than words ever could, reveling in the simplicity of being present with one another, in the joy of choosing each other freely, and in the delicate thrill of knowing that the connection they had forged was no longer tentative or uncertain but fully recognized and cherished. Emma thought about the months leading up to this moment, the first meeting in the cafe, the shared coffees, the walks, the stolen moments of conversation and understanding, and marveled at how life, in its unpredictable way, had guided them through a labyrinth of chance, longing, and hesitation to arrive exactly where they were meant to be, hearts aligned and spirits attuned to one another. Daniel, for his part, reflected on the journey he had taken, the courage it required to step away from expectations and follow his heart, the fear he had faced in confronting difficult truths, and the quiet elation of discovering that true love often demanded risks but rewarded them with profound joy and fulfillment, a love that could sustain them even through life's inevitable uncertainties. Together, they began to envision a life not defined by obligation or fear but by choice, affection, and the tender knowledge that they had found something rare, a connection that honored both their individuality and their shared dreams, allowing space for growth, understanding, and unwavering support. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm amber glow across the city, they found themselves sitting on a quiet bench overlooking the water, the reflection of the sky mirrored in their intertwined hands, speaking softly about the future, sharing hopes and dreams that felt suddenly within reach. The gentle rhythm of the city around them a comforting backdrop to the intensity of emotions they had navigated and the love that had blossomed against all odds. Emma realized that love, in its most authentic form, was not about perfection or ease. It was about honesty, vulnerability, patience, and the willingness to step forward despite uncertainty. And in Daniel, she had found a partner willing to embrace that truth, someone whose presence made her feel alive, seen, and cherished in ways that transcended ordinary understanding. Daniel, feeling the same quiet certainty, knew that while challenges would inevitably arise, the strength of their bond, tested through time, conversation, and honesty, had prepared them for whatever lay ahead, and that their love, rooted in trust and mutual respect, could navigate any obstacle while deepening in tenderness, commitment, and shared purpose. As twilight settled over the city, Emma and Daniel walked back toward the streets where their journey had begun, the quiet comfort of holding each other's hands, sharing soft smiles, and exchanging meaningful glances reaffirming their commitment, their hearts beating in unison as they stepped into a future that was no longer uncertain but filled with promise, passion, and the gentle, enduring magic of love that had been worth every moment of doubt and every tear shed along the way. By the time they returned to the cafe where it had all started, the world seemed brighter, the streets calmer, and the air filled with possibility. They lingered for a while, savoring the quiet joy of being together, knowing that this was the culmination of a journey that had begun with a chance meeting, a spark of curiosity, and the courage to follow their hearts even when the path was unclear. In the soft glow of the cafe lights, with hands entwined and hearts aligned, Emma and Daniel understood that life's twists and turns, its challenges and delays, had only served to strengthen the bond they now cherished, and that the love they had fought to recognize and nurture would carry them forward into a shared life filled with hope, tenderness, and the quiet, profound happiness of two souls choosing each other freely, fully, and without hesitation. And so, beneath the gentle hum of city life, the golden autumn leaves, and the fading light of day, their story found a tender, fulfilling resolution, proof that love, when nurtured with honesty, courage, and patience, could overcome obstacles, heal past uncertainties, and create a bond that would endure, a love story written not in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in the quiet, everyday moments of choosing each other, building trust, and embracing the unpredictable, beautiful path that fate had laid before them, leaving both hearts full, grateful, and ready to face the future together, side by side, forever guided by the gentle hand of destiny.